I've been really busy. A lot of things happening on the personal life front. So good news is I have been blessed with two beautiful baby girls, twins, Noor and Tara. So I've been tied up with them. They were born a bit premature, so they're still going to be in the hospital for a couple of weeks, but soon we'll be able to bring them home. So that's what I've been busy with, and that's why there hasn't been much videos or much activity. So after a long time, almost 3 weeks of running around the hospital, I've gotten some time to myself. So I thought I'd take this car out and drive around and make a video and talk about something about lowering cars that either people don't know about, or they ignore it, or they try some shortcut solution to fix it. I am fairly certain most people don't know it or don't talk about it. It's something called roll center adjustment. Right. What is roll center? Roll center is the imaginary point line within the car. It's a geometric line around which the body rolls. Now, there are two ways to reduce your body roll. So one way is obviously you put anti-sway bars or anti-roll bars as they're called, and that reduces your body roll and increases your chassis suspension stiffness. So that's one way. The other way is to basically play around with the roll center. You get roll center adjusters, and it's a pretty complex geometry. It basically has to do with a line drawn from your front ball joints to the center, pointing towards the center of the car, and then another line which basically holds the line of the center of gravity of the car. And the thought behind roll center is that those two lines, whenever they intersect, or even if they don't intersect, those 2 points should be as close to each other as they can be, and that by doing so, even without adding anti-roll bars, you're essentially improving the body's ability to resist roll. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, got it. So that is essentially, in a very layman's terms, roll center. Now, your car comes with a particular roll center, which is determined by the height of the suspension, the factory suspension, and the angle of the front control arms when they are with respect to the ground on the factory suspension. So just imagine your factory suspension straight up like this, and your control arms are always in angle. They're always pointing downwards. Even when the car is fully loaded, they're pointing downwards. So this is your chassis, this is your suspension, the end of your shock absorber, and your control arms are at an angle, or at best they are parallel to the ground. At worst they are parallel to the ground. At best they are like this. Now that's how the stock suspension has the anti-roll geometry built into it. So because of that particular angle, the chassis, and a lot of forces that are at play, it gets some natural roll resistance, and the rest is supplemented by your anti-roll bars. Now, when your control arms are like this on the car's chassis, then your geometric center of gravity is somewhere in the middle. So the distance between the control arms and the geometric center of gravity is smaller. Now when you lower the car, what ends up happening is that angle control arm that you have, it'll flatten out. So as a result, and it can actually, in my case, it can actually go other way around. So now instead of your control arms pointing up or almost parallel to the ground, they're actually pointing down, which means that your roll center has, hang on a sec, what the hell? Okay, too many close people. So bottom line is the distance between your car center of gravity and the points where your two control arms meet, control arm angles meet, is increased. When that increases, that automatically adds to your body roll of your car. So I don't know if I mentioned this or not. Initially I didn't, but initially I felt it, but I was ignoring it. But then as I drove the car more and more aggressively, particularly at low speed, sharp maneuvering, I had felt, since I put the suspension on the car, that my car's front body roll has increased, which is very odd considering the suspension has stiffer springs and stiffer dampers. Now on track I felt it, but then I compensated it by increasing the stiffness of my shock absorbers, which control that body roll. But even on the track, I did feel as if my front is rolling. Body roll in the front is a lot more than this what is stock, and whereas compared to the back, it's not as bad. Back remains at more or less where it was stock. And eventually I started digging, because the more I drove aggressively, more I got settled with the suspension, more I could feel that the front end is rolling way too much, and it's kind of removing that added confidence that comes with having a coilover setup. And the only thing initially I thought my sway bar end links were too short, but then when I measured it, or too long, but then when I measured it, they were not that much different from the stock. And then when I looked under the car, and I'll put the pictures right now, on one side you'll have the angle of what I'm showing you guys is the rear control arm rear bush, the bush which is in the back towards the back of the control arm. And look at the angle on that. One of the pictures is showing the control arm when it was stock, and one of the pictures, the next picture, is showing the angle of the control arm when it is after I lowered it. And you can see that in the stock picture, the control arm bush, when the suspension is fully loaded, and the control arm was parallel to the ground or pointing downwards towards the shock absorber. Whereas after I lowered the car, and even after increasing the height quite a bit, it's pointing in the opposite direction, which means that my rear control arm bushes are lower than the suspension shock absorber, lowest point of the shock absorber of the car. As a result, my body roll has increased, and that is why I've been feeling what I've been feeling. Initially I thought it was stupid, but no, there is actually a reason and a science behind it, and it's something we often ignore when we are doing this, because normally when you're lowering the car, you're adding anti-roll bars. The anti-roll bars, additional stiffness of the anti-roll bars kind of negate the effect, but then you're not able to use the anti-roll bar to its full potential because your control arms are facing like that instead of like this. So plus it also depends slightly, actually quite a bit, on the geometry of the car's front subframe and how the front control arms are located. Now on the Laura's, the front control arm rear bush was perpendicular to your chassis. In this thing, it's parallel to the chassis, so that definitely helps. Okay, finally they didn't stop me. Usually they stop me and say "Gaari ka wrap karaya hua hai," and I show them my RC and say "Okay, jao." So yeah, so that's what's happening in this car. The couple of ways of fixing it. One is using roll center adjustment, adjusting end links, and not end links. What are they called? They're called ball joints. So you basically get taller ball joints or lower ball joints, which automatically bring down your front control arms to the original position. Now 034 makes one set, then I think White Line makes another set of these. What do you call? Ball joints. And these ball joints. Okay, wait a minute. Camera here. Slow down. Okay, dude. Camera. Oh, now you see the camera. So the control arm ball joints. But the catch with that is, if you do it like that, it adds to the camber of the car. So you get even more negative camber because it's pushing the control arm arms, the end point further out, and it does interfere with big brake kits, which I'll eventually go to. The other more rudimentary solution, which we used to use in the US for our Evos and STIs, is basically putting a spacer plate between the control arm and the ball joint. So as a result, your control arm is right now like this. You put a spacer plate over here, it lowers the control arm and brings it back to the geometry that you have. That is very good because it does two things. It increases the ride height. So now I can actually lower my spring, lower the preload on my spring, because I can lower the car 15 millimeter, because the control arm, the spacer has added 15 millimeters onto the control arm bush, onto the ride height, because by raising the suspension 15 millimeter and pushing the control arm down 15 millimeter, which is good because then I can have softer springs. My springs won't be as loaded. So that's what I found this company which makes the spacer, company which is bye bye. So hard brace suspension, they're a very famous Australian company. They make really fancy suspension parts and very good parts primarily for race applications. So I spoke to them, and they make it they make these spacers on different sizes depending on how much lower your car is from the factory setup. So we have ordered that. Also, just to add a little bit of preload to the front sway bar, I have ordered adjustable front end links, or what is commonly known as link rods. So those link rods are adjustable, so I can reduce the size of the link rod to reflect how much I have reduced the car's height from the stock. So that will add some more load to my suspension, and that added load to my front sway bar, that should also increase my front roll resistance. Now, if you guys are interested in suspension, I can go on like this forever. It's a pretty fascinating topic. It's geometry, it's physics. But more or less, by adding more front body roll, less front body roll, you're balancing the car out. Yes, it'll tend to understeer more, but if you really put a lot of front anti-roll resistance. But for this car, the way it is set up and the way it's driving, little bit more front roll resistance will actually make it handle much better and give you a lot more confidence, because then the front body roll will be very similar to the rear body roll, so you can go flatter through a corner. Right now, if I go very aggressively through zigzagging, then my front body roll is a lot more than my rear body roll, which makes the rear a little unstable, and at high speed maneuvering that can be unsettling. If you know how to handle it, you can do it, but even then, the whole idea of this car is to make it handle like it's on rails, so you don't have to compromise on the handling. So that's the next steps. I think I've also gotten a polyurethane insert for my dog bone mount that will help reduce the front and back movement, and will help reduce the wheel hop quite a bit. So I didn't want to go for any metal insert, because that has way too much noise and vibration in the car. I don't like it, particularly with DSG cars. These metal inserts from APR or 034 on a new car, they won't be that bad, but as the rubber bushing in the subframe breaks down, they become very noisy and very vibration, a lot of vibration. The poly ones I've used in the Laura, and they were very good. They're really good. Eventually they also wear out, but when they wear out, it's a simple matter of just pulling the old bush out, putting a new bush in, and replacing and putting it in there. In the Laura, I went one step ahead because that was very much track focused. I had put in the 034 solid bush, which automatically eliminated the need for any kind of insert, because the bush itself was a solid rubber, and that was the best compromise you could do between drivability and stiffening the whole engine setup as a whole. I'm not gonna do that here until it's time to replace the bush, which takes about 4-5 years from now. So I'm gonna go with the polyurethane insert, which should hold without making the car very uncomfortable, especially with the AC on. So that's it. When I get those stuff, I'll start putting it together and we'll make a short video. Hopefully by then I should have moved houses also. I'm moving to Gurgaon now, so and the girls would have been home, so it'll be an awesome time. And I'm really looking forward to the kids, man. I mean, imagine not one but two Sabine Smiths, queen of the Nürburgring. I mean, my children, so they're going to learn how to drive, they're going to learn how to go-kart, they're going to work with me on the cars. They're going to be fascinating, and I really hope that, all the love that I've received from my family, from my friends, from all of you on social media towards these two children, it really goes a long way and helps. Any positive energy helps bring them home faster. So continue showing the love. I really like it, and that's more or less it.